What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. So we're going to talk about my favorite overall rifle today. I have fairly recently, put out a video on configuring a rifle for home defense and that type of stuff. It was mostly like AR-centric, and I touched on the AK a little bit, but since then I got a bunch of questions that are revolving around the AK. So I'm going to simply just go into the AK a little bit more in depth, mostly because a lot of those questions can be asked or can be answered really in this video here. Now, personally, I prefer the AK as an all-around rifle, but the thing is that it isn't, to me, it is the all-around rifle. Like, it's the jack-of-all-trades rifle, to where it can do about anything that you ask of it, just not as good as a specialized gun. Right, like a standard length AK. Okay, it can do about everything that you ask of it, and maintains that extreme reliability and all that stuff, provided you have good magazines. But it runs into little issues here and there because of just the development time in North America on it. Right, because North America seems to be like the guys that take the lead on small arms development for the most part. And if it's not North America, it's really like Western civilizations in general that really spearhead small arms development as far as just enhancing things and updating them and all that stuff, because we have that approach to it. But as far as an individual rifle is concerned, I personally prefer the AK as like my jack-of-all-trades gun, because yes, it can do about everything, but it can't do anything extraordinarily well, realistically. So, talking about this, we're going to go over a home defense setup, because that's what a lot of you guys ask about. Now, something you'll run into is pretty much any AK that you add stuff to is not going to be the same, right? Because anytime that you add something like this Ultimac rail onto, on a regular wasser, which is what this is, it was just worked over by Meridian Ordnance. You'll have to do a little bit of shaving here. You'll have to do a little bit of fandangling there. And it is more difficult to configure these guys than, for instance, like an AR is concerned, right? Or even a SCAR for that matter, or something like that. So you will have to acknowledge the fact that this is going to be a little bit more of a pain in the ass to work up, albeit it's not that crazy. You will have to acknowledge that. Now, the first thing that you really have to understand, and that I personally consider anytime that I'm messing with an AK, is how's my heat shielding, right? Now, the heat shielding on like regular wooden handguards and stuff like that is usually pretty good. Usually handles heat just fine and disperses it pretty well. I personally really like the wooden handguards, mostly because they handle heat very well. And when things start to heaten up, I can creep up into it and keep away from hot stuff, and it just delays how long it takes for me to have to drift back into here. And I'm only really concerned about that because I take classes all the time, and while I'm teaching, I do a lot of demos and stuff like that. So because of the volume at which I shoot, I'm worried about heat, right? And honestly, if you're picking up a rifle or whatever for home defense, if you pick up a firearm for self-defense, I'm a firm believer in training with it. So, I think that heat should be one of your first considerations, because some bitch gets hot, okay? So, a good option here is the regular wooden handguards. They handle that real well. If you want to ninja-fly it up a little bit, there are a couple of other alternatives. One of the best alternatives, in my personal opinion, for a handguard is the Magpul handguard, whether it be like the standard length or the extended. And that's about the only thing that I like that Magpul makes specifically for the AK. And the reason why I actually like it is, number one, it stays in place. It doesn't back out or come loose like their stocks do, and I see it happen all the time. Also, the handguard itself elevates where you can place your hand a little bit up on the handguard, like up on the actual rifle. Like for instance, on this Ultimac, the handguard would stop about here, right where my middle finger is. Also, it's a little beefy in that it's a little wide, and what that helps you out with is that it essentially pushes out your hands a little bit farther away from the heat source, which is right here, right? So I like that handguard, and I've seen them on a bunch of different rifles. I've shot them in comparison to like a regular wooden handguard and stuff like that, and I really like it, right? There are always a billion other options out there. Like I have a Hogue one on my Chinese Mac 90, which I really need to start shooting more. You guys have been asking about it, and I miss it. But that's a good handguard too, because it's nice and rubbery and stuff. It deals with heat really well. And the only con that I really have is that it's about the same size as a regular wooden handguard, which to me is a little small, and it feels like I'm holding the handguard like this when the gun starts to get hot, practically. I mean, I know that what it essentially is that it changes from like here to essentially here, and I'm stuck here the whole time, but it feels like I'm holding on to it like so, you know. So if you can afford a little bit more space for your hands, and if it also backs you off of the hot stuff a little bit more, that's good to me. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about really here is the light. The light is a point of debate for some people, because an issue that a lot of people run into with the light with a regular AK, okay, and we're talking about like a regular gas block and front sight base, to where the gas block is independent from the front sight post and all that, or front sight tower rather. The issue exists to where placing a light on something like an Ultimac is difficult because of the fact that the light, generally speaking, ends up behind that front sight tower. As far as home defense, it's not really that big of a deal. It really isn't. However, if you take this guy out to a class and you start shooting at slightly greater distances in the dark and stuff like that, like for instance, in my classes, right, we do a night portion the first day of pretty much every class that we do. So when you start to back up and when you start to shoot a lot, having your front sight tower illuminated or backlit to where it looks pretty white from here, it really starts to mess with your vision, especially once you start trying to shoot through smoke, as well as the fact that you're now dealing with a backlit front sight tower. So it is kind of a pain in the ass, really. But a way around that is by using a front sight tower and stuff like that. And yeah, I know I say that phrase all the time. I'm trying to avoid it. But using a front sight tower / gas block combo really helps solve this issue, because it makes it rather easy to throw on something like a Thorntail and a G2X or a Pick-a-Light, really, and you can sling the thing a little bit more forward. You're not backlighting your front sight tower, and you have good and regular extension rather than having to reach super far out there to get to it. And as far as just AKs and stuff are concerned, I don't like, you guys see on ARs, I have a pretty far stretched out extension, pretty similar to the extension that I would have with a pistol. It's only with a rifle on that support side. So I generally, with those guns, like to reach out a little bit more. But on the AK itself, the gas port area and anything close to the front sight tower gets really hot really fast, and it would force me to pull my hand back anyway. So I'm not a huge fan of the extended stuff. But if that's your way around it, if you are in your mind, you're just like, screw it, wear a glove, reach out further and get that light further out so that I can, you know, not backlight my front sight and all that, while maintaining a little bit of an extension, screw the heat. Okay, I totally understand that. I totally get it. And there is a little bit of debate as far as where to stick a light and where to stick a handguard and all that stuff on the AK. I prefer a little bit shorter because you don't last very long out front, in my experience with AKs, because they get hot as hell really fast. So for those of you that can hang a little bit longer, or you have handguards that stick your hands out a little bit further, like for instance that extended Magpul handguard, okay, cool, I totally get it. And now we're going to talk about an optic, right? So as far as the optic is concerned, there's a slight amount of debate on where to place an optic, realistically speaking, if you have a quality dot of some kind, like if you have a Holosun or an aim point or something, slinging it up here is not that big of a deal. Your cheaper stuff, first of all, I wouldn't even recommend throwing on a self-defense rifle. I would just use the irons and a light. But for those of you that sling like a TRS 25 or whatever on those guns, understand that this is not the place for that. It really isn't. I've seen them get burned out on Ultimax and stuff. They'll come out to classes and die to where, like, after a while you start to notice like some weird fluttering, and then it'll just kind of turn off, and then you shake it and you hear a whole bunch of rattling on the inside, and it's because you're melting the internal components. So if you must put one of those cheapos on there, you can use the side mount on this. I mean, RS Regulate's got great stuff for it. Just Loctite all the screws, and that goes for anything on a rifle, period, but especially the AK because it's got a fairly violent action. But RS Regulate has good stuff to sling up here. I've seen people get away with like Midwest Industries. The only issue with that one is that you can't really turn the top rail at all, and you'll notice real fast that no AK is the same. So on the 1913 top of like a Midwest Industries mount could be off center from the rest of the rifle, and that gives a lot of people issues as far as being able to zero it all the way. But if you can get away with this and sling this optic up here, okay, great. Also, there are the guys that are just kind of like, you know what, I want to sling an Ultimac up here and a side mount on there so I can stick my optic up here and I can stick my light up here and try to keep the stuff balanced instead of throwing everything out front, especially on a 30 caliber rifle, which I totally understand, because trying to balance a gun that is nose heavy to start with is very uppermost in a lot of people's minds. So I personally understand that. It's just, for me, the extra ounces up front don't matter quite as much because I'm supporting this up here. You know, I'm in the gym 5 to 6 days a week, so I can handle being out here for 2 or 3 plus minutes shooting 3 or 4 magazines through the gun. It doesn't bother me as bad, but I can understand why guys want to center it up, even guys that are super fit, and they're just kind of sitting there like, I hate the nose heaviness of the AK because it feels like I'm doing this anytime that I'm shooting it. So I understand. Now, here's a critical component that I absolutely need to talk about. Look, I understand a lot of guys that look around on the interwebs or anything like that, and they'll see, bake lights for like $1 bajillion a piece, and they'll look at, now US Palm magazines are real expensive because US Palm went under, and that is terrible, and I hate that. But for God's sake, avoid the cheapo depot companies that put out AK magazines, okay? The Tapco stuff folds in half without any real effort. The tabs rip off. The magazine bodies themselves, they crush really easily. I've seen people like keep their Tapco magazines loaded for a few months, and they start to essentially begin to explode. Pro Mag is even worse, and below both of those, in my personal opinion, because the feed lips crack on them all the time, is the Magpul AK mags. I'm still seeing those die. So if you're going to get magazines for a self-defense rifle, and if you're going to train with the really cheap stuff, Bakelights work. They work really good. If you can find US Palm magazines, get those. They work pretty good. But you can still look around for, like East German surplus magazines that are like $10 a pop, and you can buy like 10 of them for less than $10 a piece. I think the last time that I bought East German magazines, it was like $85 for 10 of them. They work really good. You can drive nails with them or beat people to death, and they work really well. Yeah, whatever. They're heavier, but they freaking work all the time. So if you're going to stick a magazine in a home defense rifle and set that beside your bed, it had better be a magazine that works. Okay? If you come out to class with, like, quote, training magazines, which I don't believe in that at all, but if you come out to class with training magazines, I understand. Just don't be surprised when they die. So, whatever. Now, as far as sling setup is concerned. When we're talking about home defense, dude, pick your poison, really. This is just for carrying it around, but as far as home defense, I don't even mess around with slings. I just leave them off, and I go and do my thing. As far as individual home defense is concerned, I'm not concerned about wearing a sling on the inside, and there's arguments for or against, but I'm on the against side of the house, mostly because I'm not going to sit here and finger fuck with a sling when there's stuff going on in the house, and I have to make sure that my stepdaughter is secure, and very soon my son, right, because he's coming in a few months. So I'm not going to sit here and dick around with gear. I'm just going to pick up a rifle and go do what I got to do. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you guys configure your rifles for like home defense and stuff like that. I don't really get into the extended range stuff because anything that I would sling glass on an AK for is stuff that I can already handle with a dot. You know, there are some of you guys that stick like intermediate variable optics on top of your guns. I absolutely recommend going to RS Regulate for a good mount, and make sure that you get good rings and stuff too. Like American Defense is awesome, not just in their adjustability but in their durability. I've had one of those mounts, or a set of rings that an AccuPower has been running on for a little while, and I beat the crap out of my gear, and it still holds zero. It's pretty easy to take on and off if I have to. It's pretty easy to adjust the tension on. It's great. So let me know what you guys think about all this, and come out and train with us. I have a link for that in the description below. Come and check out what it is that we're doing. We have stuff going on in Florida soon, and then we have Lexington, Kentucky, and we also have Louisiana, getting ready to set up stuff in Maine. Probably going to go back to Indiana, that type of stuff. So come train with us so we can teach you how to use these things well. If you want to support us through Patreon and or train really, really cheap with us, go ahead and check out Patreon and all that stuff. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. And if you want to join our little discussion page, I have a link for that also in the description below. It's through Facebook, so have fun with that. But remember, guys, regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy. Stop buying Tapco.